Good morning. We want to welcome members of the media and other distinguished guests today as we kick off the Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over campaign, which will go through the Labor Day weekend beginning tomorrow, going all the way through September 1st. Drunk driving kills over 10,000 people every year on average across the nation. One person every 51 minutes is killed by an impaired driver that is intoxicated on alcohol. When we have holiday weekends and time periods whenever there is a holiday, it brings a surge of drunk drivers to the roadways and the streets of every state and every town. Of all traffic fatalities over the 2012 Labor Day campaign, or the Labor Day weekend, across the nation, about 38% of those were alcohol impaired drivers. Normally, across the nation, that number's about 30%, and in the state of Tennessee, it's about 26%. So we're thankful that our number is as low as it is, but it does show a trend that during times of the holiday season, people tend to drink a lot more and make a lot of irresponsible decisions not to be respectful and not to take into consideration the safety of others traveling on the roadways. That is why we ask that you join law enforcement all across the state of Tennessee, the Tennessee Highway Patrol, sheriff's departments, police departments, and other local safety advocates in our efforts, not just statewide, but nationwide as well, to make the Labor Day period a very safe holiday for citizens all across the state of Tennessee. One of the reasons we do this is because research shows that high visibility can reduce alcohol impaired crashes by as much as 20%. With that in mind, the Tennessee Highway Patrol, Sheriff's Department, police departments across Middle Tennessee and across the state of Tennessee will be out in force doing saturation patrols and roadblocks from August 15th, which is tomorrow, all the way through September 1st. Not only do we ask that you drive sober and responsibly, but we plead with you to please wear your seatbelt. We have lost 568 people across the state of Tennessee this year to highway fatalities. The unfortunate part of that is almost 60% of those were not belted. This year we have lost 212 people who were unrestrained, and 29 of those we don't know if they were wearing a seatbelt or not. Tennessee has a lot to be thankful for when it comes to wearing seatbelts. Our seatbelt rate as of this year is at 90%, but there's still that other 10% that accounts for the major portion of our fatalities here in the state of Tennessee. We also want this message to reach those who drive on the rural highways. This year, the number of fatalities in the state of Tennessee on rural roadways is as high as it is in the municipal areas. So even though you may think you're safe when you're close to home, that is not always the truth. And it does not always hold true. So be careful wherever you're at. No matter how close you are to home or no matter how far away, we encourage you to drive safely and responsibly and buckle your seatbelt. Today we are very fortunate to have with us several different guests. From the time that I became involved in the Governor's Highway Safety Office, our leader was Kendall Poole. Director Poole, over the last several years that I've been involved, has made great strides as our leader in bringing our fatality numbers to some of our lowest ever, to bringing our seatbelt rate where it is. And I know that he would contribute that a lot to the law enforcement and the boots on the ground, not only here today, but all across the state of Tennessee. So at this time, I want to introduce to you the Director of the Governor's Highway Safety, Director Kendall Poole.
Thank you, Tony. Tony does an incredible job, as evidenced by the ladies and gentlemen that you see standing behind me. most folks think all we do is booze it and lose it and drive sober, get pulled over and click it or ticket, and that's a very, very important part of what we do in the Governor's Highway Safety Office. Education and letting the public know exactly what we stand for and what we mean, and getting that message out is tremendous. But I've said it before many, many times, and I'm going to say it again, that all the education in the world is not good and not good enough unless we have law enforcement backing that up. And what we've been able to do, not only across the state of Tennessee, but particularly here in Middle Tennessee, in terms of participation, in terms of involvement, in terms of campaigns, in terms of mobilizations, in terms of numbers of lives saved, is unprecedented. Tony's done a terrific job of bringing all of these chiefs and majors and lieutenants and sergeants and road officers together to make sure that they are all on the same page, and that's about saving lives in the state of Tennessee. Tony quoted you a lot of numbers about where we are, and we can't ever forget that every number means a life. We've said it before, and we're going to say it again. One is too many. And all of the progress that we have made is tremendous. But we're going to continue to go forward. And we're going to continue to try to save lives. These holiday periods that we deal with, whether it's Memorial Day or the 4th of July or the Labor Day weekend, which we're now going into, are all critical periods that we deal with. That's why we initiate these campaigns at this particular time of the year. When we talk about August 15th through September 1st and we focus on impaired driving, there's a reason for that. The historical numbers, the data, which we are driven by, backs every single one of those up. The impaired driving numbers are phenomenal. We are well below the national average in terms of impaired driving fatalities, as Tony pointed out. But again, one is too many. And it's my hope that over this period, that this particular campaign and these particular mobilizations, with these ladies and gentlemen behind me across Middle Tennessee, will result in people being able to go home to their loved ones. Nobody's 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Everybody thinks, well, it's not going to happen to me. We have to continually make good decisions on the roadways because we have a responsibility. And these folks are simply here to help our community and their jurisdictions understand exactly that. This is about the good for society. This is about saving lives. It's about saving money. It's about people being able to spend holidays and being able to go home to their loved ones. So as it gets hotter here toward the end of the summer and as we move into Labor Day, please don't forget that. Let me tell you where we are right now in our fatality numbers for the year. And I want to thank Commissioner John Schroer of the Tennessee Department of Transportation for making those numbers available to the public on our dynamic message signaging boards across the state, all 151 of those across the state. It's brought more public awareness to that. But as of today, we are minus 33 as compared to the same time last year in fatality numbers. Last year, in 2013, the first 6 months were tremendous. But once we got to July, August, and September, the end of the summer, it was a very deadly time on Tennessee's roadways. And looking at our numbers and planning for this year, we knew that if we could just match what we did the first 6 months of last year, we would be in good shape. And lo and behold, we did match those numbers for the first 6 months of the year. Now, in July and August, we're minus 25. We're minus 14 right now in August. And we continue to move forward and move forward and move forward. And if we can close out the end of this summer strong, the end of our 100 Days of Summer Heat campaign from Memorial Day to Labor Day, we are going to be able to say at the end of the year that we set all kinds of records. And when we say we set all kinds of records, that's great. That's the competitive spirit and the competitive nature in all of us. But when we talk about numbers again, we cannot forget that every number means a life. So that's what we're here today. We're here today to say, if you choose to drink, please don't get behind the wheel. That's all 365 days a year, but particularly for this campaign and what we're focusing on right now, because these folks behind me are here to enforce that. So congratulations to all of you. We've never had this much participation in our Middle Tennessee campaign as we have right now, and that's a credit to these ladies and gentlemen. That's a credit to Tony Burnett and all of our involvement across the state of Tennessee, because together we can make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendall. We will also going to have a few of our great partners to come and speak as well. I was thinking yesterday about these two guys that we're going to hear from next. They are career law enforcement people who have knocked on doors, shared the bad news. They have witnessed firsthand what happens when people drive responsibly, when they drink and drive. They fail to wear their seatbelt. And as they come and they speak, know this, that their story comes from the heart. Their passion comes from the heart. I'm so thankful for Chief Mike Walker of Laverne Police Department and his role with the Governor's Highway Safety Office. He has a decorated career. We're thankful that he is here today, and we want him to come and speak to us at this time.
Thank you, Tony. I grew up in a small town in a funeral home. I was in the first group of EMTs in that small rural county near Chattanooga that were trained in that county. I worked on the ambulance. I'm an old volunteer firefighter. I've seen impaired driving and the results of impaired driving almost all my life in some form or fashion. I'm fixing to begin first part of next year my 4th decade in law enforcement, and I've seen it from a totally different perspective than those others for the last almost 4 decades now. In 1983, in the agency I retired from 4 years ago, I started looking at, on a daily basis, all the crash data, particularly the fatal crash data, because I was responsible for a group back then called FARS. Now it's known as the Fatality Analysis Reporting System, which gathers in-depth data far and beyond what we see just from the crash report itself. Goes back and looks at driver histories, many other things that are involved in that crash, and there's a lot of data drilling. One of the things that we know from the crash data that we gather today is we still don't test enough drivers who are involved in fatal crashes for alcohol and other drugs. And I say that in that manner because alcohol is a drug. Alcohol is just as bad as a prescription drug or an illegal drug that's not a prescription drug. It's become an acceptable occurrence in today's society. A few years ago, Kendall will remember, we had the president of MAD speak at a press conference at my former agency. And one of the things he talked about then was the society attitude still today. We've made tremendous progress. The number of alcohol and other drug-related crashes have decreased percentage-wise. But folks, the ages of 21 to 44 represent 66%, 2/3 of the people killed in alcohol and other drug-related traffic crashes. We get upset because we lose young lives across the ocean in deserts. I'm the daddy of a young soldier who completed a tour in Afghanistan in 2012 and into 2013. But what we don't realize is each year in this country, we have more people die as a result of impaired driving than we've had in Iraq and in Afghanistan since 9/11. In the state of Tennessee alone, we have almost as many people dying in impaired traffic crashes as we have murdered. We have children who die in heated vehicles, die from physical abuse or neglect, and we become very upset about it. What happens when we have 15% of our children who die in impaired driving traffic crashes are actually riding in the vehicle with the impaired driver? It's high time that we change our attitudes, change our opinions. We talk about people who are walking up and down the street carrying weapons, shooting people, and we get all excited about that. But we seem to neglect and even accept, to some degree, those who are willing to get behind the wheel of one of these motor vehicles out here and drive down the road at 45, 55, 70 while they're impaired. At any speed, it's dangerous. What if we had someone that sat down and had 3 or 4 drinks, 3 or 4 beers, and got behind the wheel of the vehicle? What would we do? Most people wouldn't do anything, because they probably look at it as if there but for the grace of God go I, because many have done that. Luckily, most of them were not involved in a serious crash, particularly a fatal crash. It's estimated over 300,000 people drive while impaired every single day on our great country's highways and streets. It's also estimated that we only arrest about 1.5% of those. You see all these folks back here. This is a portion of what will be out working very hard over the next several days, the next few weeks, to try to bring a happy end to our summer rather than a terrible end. Many of those folks back here have done just like me. They've gone and had to knock on that door. The one that sticks out in my mind the most is a young man I watched grow up in that small rural county. I was back there as a troop lieutenant with THP. And I was working one Friday night. We got a call about a serious crash out on top of one of the mountains near Chattanooga. I watched this young man grow up. I watched him become an all-state football player, an all-state baseball player. I watched him sign with one of the universities to play football. And then I watched him leave and go to another higher education with another grant to play baseball because he realized he loved baseball more. I sat beside his mom and dad when his younger sister played softball and volleyball with my 32-year-old daughter. I knew his grandparents. We were all friends. When I arrived on the scene of that crash, one of the things I found when a young trooper walked up to me and told me was this young man had been killed. He was driving. He was impaired. He had 2 of his friends he grew up with. I knew all their mamas and daddies and grandparents too. They were both very seriously injured, but they did survive. They were out that night driving down the road, having had too many beers. Ran off the road, ran through a fence and hit a small cedar tree that had happened to hit right in the driver's door, and he was killed instantly. So that young trooper and I and one of our local small town doctors who was there on the scene drove off the mountain about 12, 15 miles to his house. At 2:30 in the morning, I had to knock on that door. Driving down there was extremely hard. Getting out of that car and walking toward that front door was harder. It was very hard to knock on that door because I knew what we were having to do then at that point. Light came on in the living room. His dad opened the door. And I'll never forget the expression on his face. He knew why we were there. They had 2 children. Their daughter was home. They knew their son had been out. When he mentioned our names and invited us in, his wife was still in the bedroom down the hall, and you could hear her coming up the hall. And as she rounded the corner and looked toward that front door and saw the 3 of us standing there, she knew what it was. I'll never forget the look on that mama's face when she saw us. I'll never forget her words, seeing her tears. Her heart literally ripped out and torn apart because her son, this good kid, wasn't coming home anymore. So many of these folks back here have done that time and time and time again. We don't like it. We hate it. But it's a necessary evil as a part of this job. But I'll tell you, we don't like arresting people and having to put them in jail either. That's not necessarily fun. However, we only find about 1.5% of them. Remember that figure? We don't get to enough of them in time because there aren't enough of us. We have a lot of other duties we need to be doing in our communities. Trying to investigate crimes and solve crimes, serious, heinous crimes in some instances. But society for too long has accepted traffic fatalities as a result of impaired drivers, and it's high time that we step up as citizens in the greatest country in this world and do something about it and take action. It's high time people in Washington, on Capitol Hill in Nashville, look at it as something other than an individual problem. It's a societal problem, folks. When we lose one, that's way too many. When we lose almost as many people in our state every year as the number we have that are murdered, that's way too many. We need to be as upset about that as we are the murders, because they're so close in numbers. When you think about the fact that we only find 1.5% of them, how many more are out here? If I pull my weapon right now and walked out here and drank 3 or 4 drinks, 5 drinks, whatever, and walked down Medical Center Parkway, how many phone calls do you think would go in on 911 to Murfreesboro Police Department? They'd be ringing off the hook. They don't have enough dispatchers there to answer those 911 calls. But if I went in here and had 3 or 4 drinks, if this was a local establishment, walked out and got behind the wheel of that vehicle and got on the highway, how many calls do you think there would be? Very seldom. There's few, if any. It's high time we change our attitudes about it. Folks, the heartache, not counting the financial burden on families. With that one crash I told you about, that was 3 families that were absolutely devastated. There are 2 young men still alive today who still live with that. One of them I've seen several times through the years, and every time I see him, he tears up. He's so blessed to still be here, is the way he looks at it. He said, because we were so stupid. Drive sober or get pulled over. I'd love to be able to tell you every time you do it, we're going to find you and we're going to stop you and we're going to give you a place to stay at the Crossbar Hotel. But we can't do that. We can't find every one of you. There's not enough of us. So we have to ask citizens to help. It's kind of like Neighborhood Watch. Our citizens need to be calling in when they see something going on, something happening. We need to know about it, because our citizens are our eyes and our ears out here in the community and on our highways. Far, far too long have we accepted that fact that we've lost so many as a result of alcohol and other drugs. And it's time that we stand up and do something about it. It needs to become a Part A crime, in my opinion. both from IBERS and the other databases. In Tennessee, we use instant-based reporting system. It needs to be there. When we have someone who takes a life on the road, it needs to be there. They need to be charged. They need to be taken to court, and a jury needs to hear it. Every single case. Does that get good people? Yeah, really good people. Really good people. Drive sober or get pulled over. I can assure you that every single person back here in this group will be focused in and honing in those who choose to not only put themselves in harm's way, but every single person out there on our streets and highways. Not just this season. We're moving into the football season this fall. We're moving into Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and then we start all over again. Valentine's Day, St. Patrick's Day, Cinco de Mayo, etc., etc. It's never ending. We don't stop. We do it every single day. It's not just special times. We do it all the time because it's our responsibility when we raise our hands and take that oath of honor to serve the citizens that we all serve in our various communities, in our various agencies. It's our responsibility to make sure and ensure we do everything we can to protect them. Be alert. Watch what's going on. Kendall told you a minute ago, your best defense against a drunk driver is to wear that seatbelt. So many don't. The overwhelming majority of the people who are involved in alcohol-related crashes who die are not restrained. It can be a simple run off the road, roll over, and you look at it and say, well, that vehicle's really not torn up. What happened? Well, they weren't seat belted. Broke their neck when it threw them around inside, or it ejected them and the vehicle rolled over them. Be safe. That's what we're asking you to do. I gave you some real harsh numbers. I kind of preached a little bit and got on my soapbox about some of the things that really upset me. But after 4 decades of putting one of these on, almost 4 decades, I'm tired of seeing it. I'm getting old. There are a few other old guys back here behind me, and they're getting tired of it too, because we've had to do it far too long. And I don't want these young guys and gals back here having to do the same thing for the next 3 or 4 decades in their careers too. We ask you to be safe, buckle up, slow down. Putting on makeup, doing your hair, reading a newspaper, shaving, trying to eat, play with the radio. All of those things that distract you from what you're doing cause deaths and serious injuries every single day, every single year in our state and across our great country. Be safe. Watch what you're doing. Don't drink and drive, because if we do find you, we're going to give you that ride. And the reason is, in an old PSA that GHSO had a few years ago, an old guy said that impaired drivers bring on a wake of innocent victims. And that's the problem. Those who are innocent that aren't involved. We ask you to be safe. Take care of yourselves. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. If you drink, don't drive. Get a designated driver. God bless you all. Thank you, and be safe.
Thank you, Chief Walker. Another one of our great partners, especially here in Middle Tennessee, is the Rutherford County Sheriff's Department. They've made great strides to try to make this county, its highways, and its streets a safer place for its citizens. We appreciate their partnership, and I appreciate this next guy. He's always been a friend of mine in law enforcement, and a friend of law enforcement, anybody that knows him. So it's good to have Captain Steve Spence, Rutherford County Sheriff's Department.
Good morning. The Rutherford County Sheriff's Office is honored to be part of Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over. August 23rd, we're going to hold a checkpoint on Bragg Highway. We're going to do saturations for high DUI crash areas August 29th through the night of Labor Day, September the 1st. January 2013 through August 2013, we made 175 DUI arrests. This year, in the same span, we went down 9 DUIs. We arrested 166. It shows where the partnership with Governor's Highway Safety Office does pay off. It makes a difference, us working together to keep the streets safe. Let me encourage you, it doesn't pay off to drink and drive, and there's no excuse for it. Call a taxi or call a friend to come pick you up. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Captain Spence. I want to thank the Rutherford County Chamber of Commerce for letting us meet here in this great place for this press event. And I also want to say thank you to these partners behind me. They will sacrifice a lot of time over this holiday with their families to see that you arrive safe at yours. Without these guys that you see in this uniform from all over Middle Tennessee, all the way from the south end to the north end of Middle Tennessee, without them, GHSO will never meet our individual goals for your safety. So for them, thank you guys for the time that you'll spend and the time that you'll sacrifice. In closing, our goal is not only to celebrate with our own families, but to see to it that you arrive safely with yours. If you choose to celebrate while consuming alcohol, please don't make the decision to get behind the wheel. If you do, we'll be looking for you. You may be in that small percentage that Chief Walker talked about, but know that we're out on a mission, and that mission is to keep this highway safe, not only of those who choose to drink and drive, but to those who choose to drive while distracted, those who choose to speed, and those who choose not to wear your seatbelts. Thank you, members of the media and other distinguished guests, for being with us today. If you want to interview anybody standing behind me, we'll be able to talk with you at this time. Thank you. Thank you all these agencies from across Middle Tennessee for being here today.